Hey, it's Parker Fleming. You might know me on Twitter as at Stats of War. I'm the VP of Football Strategy at Dropback, and today I'm excited to kick off a college football series. It's been a little bit since I've been on the mic consistently, and I'm excited to get back into things with Why Not Us, a college football show. This summer, I'll start by interviewing and having some conversations with some smart friends of mine about teams and players to watch and how rosters are built. So I hope you'll follow along. They'll all be hosted right here on X. We're kicking things off with a 2026 Notre Dame preview. I've got my friend Jessica Smetana on. It's going to be a great episode. I hope you enjoy. Hello, I am Parker Fleming, the VP of Football Strategy at Dropback, and I have with me today my friend Jessica Smetana. You might know her from the Le Batard Show, from the Echoes podcast, or on social media, Jessica_Smetana everywhere. And today we're going to talk a little bit about Notre Dame's 2026 season. Jessica, how are you today?
I'm feeling really excited that we are just a few weeks away from the season finally starting.
Absolutely. Something hit me. World Cup, not to date this too much, but World Cup ended, US was done, and like all of my emotional energy immediately was like, boom, yes. College football is right around the corner. So very, very fun. Wanted to grab you and just have a conversation. Don't anticipate this being an interview or a series of hard questions or anything, more so as, everyone's kind of gearing up for college football. Let's dive into a couple teams, and how we're framing this, as I explained in the intro, is why not us? So kind of looking at some teams and saying, hey, 2026 is right there. Everything is on the table for you. How is that going to happen? I think Notre Dame is a great team to kind of start this off with. 10-2 last year. I think everyone in South Bend was disappointed with how the season ended and with the playoff shakedown and all of that. And, really, really came on strong, lost a good amount of talent to the NFL draft. How are the vibes going into 2026? What are the expectations, both kind of within the program and from the fan side of things?
I think the vibes are really good right now. Notre Dame is on a bit of a recruiting heater for the 2027 class, so everyone is pretty excited about that. But I also think with CJ Carr returning, the first time Notre Dame's had a quarterback returning for a second consecutive season, I believe, since Ian Book in 2020, the expectations are super high. This is a team that has added a lot of depth through increased recruiting performances over the last two or so cycles with Marcus Freeman, and now is returning both coordinators. Last year there was a coordinator change after the national championship appearance in which Al Golden left for the NFL and Chris Ash came in. And so there were high expectations last season, but that was a little bit uncertain. And CJ Carr or Kenny Minchie, who's going to end up starting, that was a little bit uncertain. So those things are not really on the table right now. It's more so like some of the best players that have played for Notre Dame in the last 2 decades are coming back this year, Leonard Moore and CJ Carr among them. And so, yeah, the expectations are super, super high. And the schedule also is formatted in a way that I think is beneficial to Notre Dame versus last season when they started off with their 2 toughest teams right at the start of the season. This year, they get a little bit more of an ease into some of their more difficult opponents in November.
And that on-ramp certainly helps. I wonder if there's not some sort of psychological effect with evaluation where it's better to have a hard game later than to kind of have it early. You wonder if the timing of those games last year had been different, what the perception of Notre Dame would have been. I want to get into the nitty gritty. I think you said a lot there, Carr, the defense, the schedule. I want to hit all of those. I do want to take a minute to kind of focus on Marcus Freeman for a second, because I was having a conversation with a friend who's Notre Dame adjacent, and there's so much coming out about like the level of recruiting they're doing and everything. And I asked the question just because I'm an inherent cynic, not because I don't appreciate what Marcus Freeman's doing. I was like, man, is this really the guy, or are we ahead of our skis kind of with what he's doing? But you look at the retention, you look at the recruiting that they're able to do, you look how he navigated handling something that could have turned a locker room entirely sour and poisoned the offseason with the playoff last year. I mean, it looks like the recruiting and the team building and the chemistry, which is so important in college football, that maybe nobody's doing it better than Marcus Freeman right now.
I think he's certainly the best person for the job at Notre Dame. I think he has a lot of energy. He has a lot of excitement around him. I think the players really like him, but he is also not, people, always use the term like players coach or like he's, the friend of the players, whatever. I don't think that's the case. I think he respects the players on the team, but he also is pretty hard on them, which is what makes him ultimately a good coach, that he's able to like help develop a lot of the talent around this team and make them into a good team and not just a group of good, talented players. But, operating within the framework of Notre Dame, not the easiest. Obviously, Brian Kelly did a really good job over a decade kind of building Notre Dame back up into a legitimate football program, but left a lot of things to be desired. I think a lot of meat on the bone in terms of recruiting. And I think Notre Dame as an institution has sort of committed more resources over the last few years as NIL has become, one of the most important things now in recruiting and in retention. And I think Marcus Freeman, the timing couldn't have been better. I think he is the right person for that because he is such a good coach, but he is also someone who's able to, I think, maneuver around Notre Dame in ways that Brian Kelly never really was able to, and people really like working with him and for him. So I do think it's just a good fit. And so far, it has been successful. Aside from last year's disappointment, obviously, I think 2024 was really where Marcus Freeman kind of showed Notre Dame fans and donors and alumni, like, here's the proof of concept. Like, we took this 2024 team from week 2 losing against Northern Illinois and not really sure where our season was going to go to making a run all the way to the national championship game and beating some really good teams along the way. Georgia, the SEC champions, Penn State, of course, Indiana at home. So I think that was really an important pivotal season for him. And now I would say there's very few people that doubt he's the right person for this job. And you can tell because last year when those NFL rumors were swirling around, the consensus opinion was like, Notre Dame, Pete Bavacqua, athletic director, do whatever it takes to keep this guy around. We really want him to stay.
Absolutely. Love that. And think that's a good point too about kind of there's so much variance year to year that like coaches can survive a down year if they have the foundation. And Marcus Freeman has kind of built the foundation for, even in the worst case scenario, like he has set this team up, right? They're going in the right direction. So interesting. Not that I in any way expect a down year here in CJ Carr's second year, consistency with Denbrock as well. Want to talk to you about Carr a little bit. Thought it was interesting, where he slots in terms of total passing EPA last season to be the nerd and pull some numbers in here. Was it plus 90.6, which was right between Brendan Sorsby and Joey Aguilar from Tennessee. But if you look at attempts, he's 50 to 60 below Sorsby and almost 100 below, more than 100 below Aguilar. So the volume wasn't there. CJ Carr is going to have an expanded role. They're going to pass more, and we'll talk about the running backs. What are we looking for in his year? His presumable breakout year. I don't know if you heard like the McElroy show or McShay show where he said, this could be the best Notre Dame quarterback of our lifetime. And I think there's big things being said about Carr. What's your read on kind of what he looks to do as he expands his role a little bit more and leads this offense?
Yeah, I think that's all certainly true. I think expanding his role is going to be the big thing here. So I think last year CJ was incredibly impressive coming into his first start on the road at Miami. And I think that if Notre Dame could redo that game, they probably would have called the game a little bit differently and kind of let him take the top off a little bit more in that one. And I think that's probably what they'll do this season. I think maybe there were some nerves that he was pressing too much or, had those like first season jitters and would turn the ball over. But I think throughout the season, you mentioned like he didn't drop back a ton, but when he did, he was super efficient. He doesn't turn the ball over a lot. He's very smart in reading defenses. His mechanics are very sound. And I think Notre Dame kind of just kept it simple for him because they did have Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love there who were just breaking off these incredible, 90-plus yard runs every other weekend last season. And they're not going to have that this year. So I think it is going to look a little bit different because of the personnel. But at the same time, I'm excited because I think Mike Denbrock has shown that he is a very versatile offensive coordinator. He's coached a lot of different types of quarterbacks, even in the span of the last 2 years, going from Riley Leonard, someone who Notre Dame rarely threw, I shouldn't say rarely, but their percentage of deep ball passes was like somewhere in like the 110s, right? And with CJ Carr last year, they ranked 8th in deep ball pass percentage. So like they're just going to call a different offense with a quarterback like CJ, who's not going to be as heavy in the design QB run game as someone like Riley Leonard was. And I think Denbrock has shown that he can adjust based off of that. So even though you have a much different skill set in your running back room now, I think that will be the adjustment. And I think some of the numbers for Carr will probably be a little bit higher this year. I don't think any of his numbers were very gaudy last year. I think it was 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, like 2,700 yards or something like that. But I think he'll probably be dropping back more, probably will be passing more this year. And the other thing is, I think, he he can move, he's mobile, but he doesn't really want to. And I'm curious to see if that's something that he'll do more of now. I think pass protection and run protection is going to be something I'm super interested to see from a little bit of a reshuffled offensive line.
Absolutely. And Carr, I think that's a good point about kind of you bringing up the depth of target. And, I still maintain that like Trevor Lawrence and Tua just broke our brains for a couple years. There's like that and COVID happened and we're like, oh, quarterbacks should just walk on campus and be NFL ready. And that kind of threw it off. And I think we're coming back to earth. And you see that a lot with college teams where they just take away a bunch of the menu and say like, hey, I know you've got the arm. I want you to make the easy throw to our stud. And then we're going to substitute for runs. And the value this year is like that average depth of target should come down as they substitute these intermediate throws that are going to require some more reads and some diagnosing from Carr and then potentially, give you more top end of the offense, but he's going to be throwing it more. Whereas last year, hey, I need 6 yards. I've got a Jeremiah Love for that. Now it's like, how do we layer the offense and let you work through it? So, some evidence of quarterback development from Denbrock there is they're going to be substituting some more of those intermediate throws. Definitely.
I agree. I also think one interesting personnel note is that last year Notre Dame had a very shallow depth in their tight end room, and Denbrock is someone who I think likes to use tight ends a lot in the blocking and in the pass game. And so going from a season before, you had Mitchell Evans, who plays in the NFL now, really good tight end, to last year, a few pretty bad injuries, and there wasn't Eli Raridon, who got drafted in the third round by the Patriots. He was really, really good, but behind him there wasn't a ton of depth. And I think this year there is more depth, and Notre Dame has a couple younger tight end players that could be real difference makers there. And I do think that in the immediate or intermediate pass game, those are players that Notre Dame just didn't have a ton of last year and couldn't really incorporate into the offense quite as much.
Absolutely. And that's a great transition to kind of into the weapons around Carr and what this offense is going to look like. Obviously, you lose Fields, kind of your top receiver there. Jordan Faison in 20% target share last season was third among returners in first down rate, which is, again, I think in college football, you're running to stay ahead of schedule and you're passing to get a first down or a touchdown, right? And so how much are you involved in that? Really, really good. Some options. I want to talk about him and then some options around him. Like Greathouse, is he healthy? Is he going to show us like what he showed us in that one game? Is that going to be, something that we see? Who else is around him? What does this wide receiver room look like?
Well, I think Faison is super underrated, and he's now solely focused on football. He was someone who was a dual sport athlete playing on Notre Dame's lacrosse team. Notre Dame's got a national championship caliber lacrosse team. So he decided, like, I'm focusing this thing right on football. And so the reports on him is that even as good as he was the last couple seasons, like he, having doubled down now on football in the spring, he's looking even better. And he is someone that can get you a first down and can create yards after contact and is just a great weapon for CJ Carr. And like I said, I think a super underrated one, just given who else is on this team. Jaden Greathouse, he didn't really practice a lot over the springtime. He has some sort of hamstring injury. I think he would have played in the playoff had Notre Dame made it last year. That was what they were, intimating, that he was just waiting out the rest of the season. Well, guess what? Notre Dame didn't make the playoff, so we didn't get to see him play at the end of the season last year. Notre Dame did get a couple of transfer players from Ohio State, Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter. Quincy Porter's coming off a knee, and he's a big body. He's someone that Notre Dame's filled that role in the portal with over the last few years. Last year it was Malachi Fields. The year before that it was Bo Collins from Clemson. And so I think Notre Dame's hoping that he'll be ready to go and that he can be someone who's a difference maker because of his size. But again, didn't get to see him play in the spring yet. And then Mylan Graham's really interesting. He's really fast. He's a great athlete. Saw him play in the spring game. I thought he was pretty good. He kind of pops on the screen, but again, he didn't play that much last year, so hasn't played for Notre Dame yet in an actual game. So a little bit of an unknown there. There's a ton of depth in the wide receiver room on this team. It's just that other than Faison and Greathouse, you haven't seen it consistently return, like as a returning talent from a returning talent standpoint for this offense. So I don't know. Can Micah Gilbert be the number one guy this year? Yeah, maybe. But he had some injury issues last year and we didn't see it. So could be a number of players that end up in leading in receptions this season. I think Faison's definitely going to be up there, if not the one again. But that is, I wouldn't say a question mark. That is just sort of we'll have to wait and see who it ends up being, because I think they have the talent in the room. It's just that we haven't seen it yet.
Absolutely. And that reinforces your earlier point about the tight end room where, one of those guys is absolutely going to step up among that too. I think it's not will they? It's just who is that going to shake out and be as we get through fall camp there. And I think in terms of revealed preference for how Notre Dame felt about, pass versus run, I thought it was really interesting. They went and got a couple wide receiver transfers, and then you lose 2 first-round running backs, and you don't do anything there, and you're going to roll with Aeneas Williams. So my one question on that, and I almost hate to take us into this, but I'm such a roster building nerd. In your opinion,
okay.
was that more like Notre Dame saying, we love Aeneas Williams? Or is that saying, hey, a $1 million running back probably doesn't gel with the culture and what we're doing here. And like, we're not going to overinvest in one position because we believe in our development pipeline.
I think maybe it could be a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B, but I do think they really like Aeneas Williams and they like his skill set. He's much different than Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love. He's got more of a pass catching skill set, which we saw a little bit from Love last year. He did sort of line up outside a few times and had some fun plays drawn up for him. But yeah, Williams is a much different running back, and they just I don't know exactly if it was, well, we can go get Hollywood Smothers, but he costs a fortune and we're not, it's not going to be the biggest value add because we do have all these other things. And so we don't need it. But I do think they like the running backs that they have, led by Aeneas Williams. There's also Nolan James, who's a smaller running back that I think we will see a lot of snaps for him. They have a couple incoming true freshmen that they really like. So I think there could be more running back versatility this year than last year, where it was really like 2 backs the whole season. And why would you sub either of them out? But yeah, I think it is just a combination of all of that. Plus, I think they really like the O-line. I think they really like CJ Carr, and I think they really like the ability to create open lanes for running backs.
That makes a ton of sense. I think, again, Aeneas is probably in one of the best situations of any running back in college football. Big shoes to fill, but nice with that. Hey, Carr is going to expand, so we're not asking you to be Jeremiah Love on day one, and we have some opportunity, which also wraps into the schedule. Again, you're not playing 2 top 10 teams the first 2 weeks. You're going to be able to have some room to grow and breathe and figure out this offense. Before we go to the defensive side of things, we should talk about the offensive line. Marcus Freeman, committed to recruiting the trenches, has some really great players. Interesting that Anthony Knapp, who is on some people's watch list for NFL draft and everything, is going to move in. I think that gels with my very amateur scouting opinion of watching him and thinking, this is a very good offensive lineman. I don't know if he's a tackle. So awesome that they're able to reshuffle and move there. Is the offensive line the biggest question mark, though, for Notre Dame? Just there's some injuries and some shuffling. I don't know where you rank that relative to the wide receiver room, for instance, where there's a little bit of uncertainty of who's going to be the guy.
Well, full caveat, my co-host, Mike Golick Jr., is the offensive line expert. But in my non-expert opinion, I'm pretty bullish on the offensive line. I think Nat moving inside is more of a natural position to him. He had to play left tackle because of injury 2 seasons ago, started his true freshman season. First game on the road at Texas A&M, by the way. Not
Welcome
an easy
to the league,
one.
Man.
And exactly. So I think him moving inside means that they have a lot of faith in Will Black, who's a sophomore. I 5-star out of Canada. They think he can come in and he has more height, he has more size. I think he's more of a natural fit there. And so I think that kind of bodes well. I think that speaks well to what they expect from Black, because Knapp was solid. When it came to blocking Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor and some of the top level guys, I think they know they need a little bit of an upgrade on the outsides. But their right tackle left for the NFL, Emil Wagner. He was, 4-year captain and played at that position for a long time. So he's gone, and Gerby Lambert is moving to right tackle, I believe. He is also, this line is so big. He's also a really big body, and I think has been pretty impressive. Played a little bit at right guard last year. So I think there's a lot of experience at the offensive line. It's just kind of playing in different positions, maybe. Ashton Craig should be back from a knee injury. He's a very, very solid starter at center for Notre Dame over the last couple of years. So, and then I think Sullivan Absher is slotted at right guard, but that could be in flux. So that's my guess at what the starting 5 is. And like I said, between Knapp, Absher, Craig, and Gerby, you have players that have played on the line before, started games before, and then you have this really talented sophomore coming in. So I think, last year the offensive line was good, but I think the running backs made them maybe look better than they were at times. And I think this year I think that they'll be even better, and I have a little bit more expectation on the tackle positions performing well.
Absolutely. Flipping to the other side of the ball, this is the best secondary in college football, and maybe one of the best cornerback rooms we've seen definitely in the portal era, in the NIL era. I don't know if I have a question on that. Yes, I feel
agree.
like that's just objectively true, right? It's almost not fun to talk about the secondary just because they are so good. The front seven is where you have the questions on this defense insofar as there are questions. Interesting for me, Gray comes in from Oregon. Talking about deep units, like that guy didn't have a spot on Oregon's defensive line because they're so deep. He comes in as kind of your Planet Theory big run stopping guy. What is this front seven doing to live up to what the secondary is going to offer Notre Dame this year?
Yeah, I think that the biggest area for where Notre Dame can improve, because I'm super excited about the secondary. I think they're excellent. And I think Notre Dame's linebackers are also really excellent, especially if Kingston Viliamu-Asa is healthy to start the season, which reports are good that he will be coming back, on schedule, if not maybe a little early. But the biggest thing is just you need an elite pass rusher if you're going to play for a national championship. In my opinion, I think that's one of the most important positions in college football. You can completely wreck a game if you have someone like a Ruben Bain on your team. You can there's teams that will not be able to stop that or be able to handle it. And so Notre Dame had Boubacar Traore coming back last season after an ACL injury, and he was pretty productive, 6.5 sacks on the season, I believe. But I think he was still sort of coming off the injury, maybe wasn't 100% himself to start the year. And so I think he will be productive. Bryce Young, the large son of Bryant Young, also back. But then, like you said, Notre Dame added a lot of size in the portal with Francis Brew, with Tion Gray, Keon Keeley from Alabama, who was initially committed at Notre Dame and then flipped to Alabama, went to Alabama, and then now transferring back to Notre Dame. So that is an area where they've fortified the position. And then you have Elijah Hughes coming back and Jason Anye, who played for Notre Dame last season as well, have a ton of experience under their belt, have been very solid in the middle of the D-line there. So I think you just need to get Notre Dame's pretty high in havoc rate, but I think get the outside pressure and get the pass rush to elevate the game a little bit. And then you have lockdown corners and two of the best safeties in college football and a quarterback running for his life. And I think that is just a recipe for success for the defense.
Absolutely. And again, we know kind of weak link, strong link theory about how pass rush and the secondary are connected. You get some benefit there.
That is something that Marcus Freeman harped on a lot last season. So yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's not even, a lot of times in college football, your best cornerback will have very few targets because if he's good, you just throw away with him.
Correct.
I don't see that being feasible for Notre Dame. I don't think there's an obvious exploit of, hey, we're going to do X to mess with this defense. You're going to hope to out execute. You're going to hope the pass rush doesn't manifest, which is a nice segue in itself to kind of the schedule and the theory of this, because I think the depth on the O-line and the D-line has me very confident that Notre Dame in the aggregate can create an elite trench unit, an offense and defense. But you mentioned an interesting point. You need that elite game breaker one guy. The by committee stuff doesn't necessarily work in the playoff. And so that's kind of the relief for me this year is not quite assuming they're going to make the playoff, but how do they approach the season and then also find the gear for the playoff when you do have to have those one-on-one matchups. Ohio State last year talking about load management. I wonder if some coaches kind of got a little bit of poisoned on that because it looked like Ohio State in clutch moments wasn't, they hadn't faced that adversity and they weren't able to hit that gear. Notre Dame's schedule sets itself up nicely for committee load management, but they also have to have an eye for, all right, when stuff hits the fan, who is the peak. So, schedule wise, looking at kind of how this breaks, how do you think they're going to approach that problem? What games kind of stand out to you?
Yeah, so I think the three most difficult games of the season, at least on paper, don't start until October 17th at BYU. And then a couple weeks later, you have Miami in South Bend. And then 2 weeks after that, SMU in South Bend. So I am the one thing about load management that I am curious about this season is now with the new eligibility rules, how is that going to impact which players play and when? Because there's so many times in the past where you've had a player who gets injured and then the backup is someone who's already played their 4 games and a coach is like, well, we're sitting them, versus now you can kind of manage your entire team when you want to. So that is a really interesting thing I'm going to keep an eye on this year, because Notre Dame does have so many freshmen coming in that are 5-star players or highly recruited 4-star players. And obviously you want to keep all of them happy, but you also want to win games. And like you said, make sure you can figure out how to dig deep in the clutch when you're late in the season and trying to figure out how to win a game. So strategically, I'm curious how that goes. But I think like really after the Wisconsin game in week 1, I think the season will sort of crescendo towards those 3 games that I mentioned. And so Notre Dame will have to be in top form for those and figure out what that looks like. I anticipate, Rice, Michigan State, Purdue, North Carolina, like those are all teams that I think in previous years I'd be like, here's a trap game, but now I'm like, Notre Dame really should be winning all of those games if they want to take themselves seriously. So maybe you would see some younger players in those. But then that's sort of the beauty of it, is that now late in the season when they are playing Syracuse on the road to end the year, or Boston College because Syracuse because USC is no longer on the schedule, and Boston College, who is still on the schedule because of the ACC tie, and maybe you will see a little bit more of that roster management, but it just seems antithetical to everything that Marcus Freeman sort of preaches. So I'm very fascinated to see how that works.
Absolutely. And Wisconsin to start the season, I think, is no joke. I'm not predicting, something crazy for them, but like they had some interesting O-linemen. Colton Joseph, I think, was very
Colton
fun.
Joseph is very fun. I agree
Yeah.
with you. I was looking at Colton Joseph highlights a few months ago, and I was like, oh my God, I got a pit in my stomach for week 1 at Lambeau Field, and I had to like slap myself in the face to snap out of it. But yeah, I think, and Wisconsin has like been digging their way out of the hole that they were in for the first couple of Fickell years. I don't think they're going to be atrocious, but like we talked about with Notre Dame's defense, you have so much returning production on that defense. I think 66% of their returning snaps are back at their respective positions. 73% of defensive snaps. Like that is a team that has played a lot of football and is going to hopefully be ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I had flagged like that North Carolina, Stanford, BYU, Navy kind of back to back. I was like, that could be a little tricky. As I dive deeper into this, I'm like, I just don't, I mean, you're not going to Stanford. Navy, we saw last year that like the talent differential is there, even as it as a physical. And so that was the one place I'd kind of circled besides the obvious peaks of Miami and SMU.
Yeah.
Like that's your season. You need to win those games. It'll be interesting to see how Notre Dame handles those from that kind of load management, stay healthy standpoint, but also like, would it surprise me if Stanford was very annoying to Notre Dame this year? Not terribly. It wouldn't be, totally
They're
crazy.
always annoying. Like they just are. It's in their nature to be annoying. Like I was at during Marcus Freeman's first season, I believe, at Notre Dame. Yeah, when Drew Pine was the starting quarterback in 2022, I watched probably one of the, and this is saying a lot because Notre Dame played in some stinkers when I was growing up. One of the worst games I've ever watched at Notre Dame Stadium against Stanford. Stanford won. I think it was like 13-10. It was just a very pitiful game. So like it's happened, and it's happened recently, but I do think that like if Notre Dame is recruiting the caliber of player that we think they are and is running this thing as smoothly and as efficiently as it seems like they have been, there were even times last year where like late in the season they were in a pretty close game against Boston College, but it never really felt like they were going to choke it away like maybe they had in a couple other games in Marcus Freeman's earlier seasons. Like this team would just kind of out to use Marcus Freeman's words, out meet the other team just with physicality in the fourth quarter, and that's sort of what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the hope, is that you're building that up, and then that becomes resilience in the playoff, kind of in the second season there. Very, very, this was great. This is exactly what I wanted out of this, getting us, so into these units, getting some players. I want to ask you one question before we sign off here. And it is a curveball. I did not tell you this beforehand, but I don't think it's crazy. One player that maybe we haven't talked on or dwelled on for a long time, if this person popped and was Notre Dame's, kind of out of left field best player this year, who do you think that would be? Somebody we should know.
I'm going to give you like a super random one. This person could end up really not even playing that much because they're a true freshman, but based off of spring football, I thought they looked pretty good. Rodney Dunham, he's an edge rusher out of North Carolina, was a 5-star recruit, a huge target for Notre Dame in last summer's recruiting cycle. Like I said, Notre Dame's, they need someone who can be productive on the edge and who can just kill teams with their pass rush. And so I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't play a ton, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he just absolutely pops off and becomes a freshman All-American like Tay Johnson was last year for Notre Dame.
Love that. Rodney Dunham at Edge. Amazing. Jessica, thank you so much for your time today. This was a great conversation. At the very least, I feel very prepared to go into Notre Dame season and know what I'm looking for. Thank you. Plug where people can find you, social media, where else? Yeah.
Yes, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, wherever you go on social media. Jessica Smetana, Jessica_Smetana. I post a lot of college football and WNBA videos. You can also listen to my Notre Dame podcast with Michael Jr., The Echoes, and Notre Dame podcast. And I'm on the Levitard Show every week.
Amazing. Can't believe I didn't work in an Olivia Miles reference
I know.
with the WNBA. We'll have to talk about it offline. But
also,
it's been
shout out to you because I reference your data visualizations and stats constantly. So this was necessary for us to do this together because I'm constantly ripping off your hard work.
Love that. Love that. That's so great. Thanks so much. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks. Bye.